Hello and welcome back to the WABAN podcast. I'm your host, Nim, and I am joined here by a man who exists with no name. Hello.
It doesn't give me much to go off, man.
Well, yeah, I know, but before we started recording, we were talking about how you didn't have a good name to go by.
There's nothing to act out or say.
Yeah, but
oh, I have no name. You good?
Yeah. You could go and pretend you're like the Clint Eastwood movies, The Man with No Name. Do you know anything about that? It's like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly and stuff. He's like the man with no name, or in those movies is his character, I think, or something like that. But I'm also joined by somebody else, Donnie Shields.
Sometimes I wish that I didn't have a name. I think it'd be a lot cooler too. Like, what would they refer to you as?
It is pretty cool. Yeah.
I mean, I have a name. Like, people know what my real name is. Like, I don't keep my real name a secret, but I do go by Nim on online and stuff. But yeah. Anyways, so Donnie, introduce yourself, introduce who you are, what you do, all that good stuff.
Yeah, so I'm Donnie Shields. I have a YouTube channel, Shield of Hope Productions, as well with the technical business side of things where I do short films, different promotional products, music videos, you name it, I do it. I also have my podcast, Hope Speaks, and Donnie Shields Unedited Podcast, but both of those you can find on the Shield of Hope channel itself, on YouTube, on Spotify, Apple Podcast. If you look up any platform, you'll probably find it under that.
All right. So, basically, me and Donnie know each other from going to the same college, and we went for the same major. So we're both film guys. So there you go. And I've been on his podcast a couple times before. And so that's kind of why I wanted to have him on here, so we could kind of do a little trade-off thing.
I feel honored, by the way.
Yes.
I feel honored.
Yes. I mean, anyone would be honored to be on the WABAN podcast. It is only the most prestigious podcast in existence.
With an average of 4 or 5 viewers?
I mean, it depends on the episode, I guess.
Yeah. It's not it's the quality that matters. It's not the size of the audience. Eventually, the size of the audience will grow, guys. Eventually, it will grow.
All right.
Yes. The quality might not be good either, but well,
that too improves later too.
If a podcast that you can really only listen to if you've seen Avatar: The Last Airbender, because that's half of what our episodes were. Just talking about that. But yeah, anyways, so Donnie, if you'd like to share any thing you're working on now, any projects, or just where you're at with your channel right now in general and your career, I guess.
Well, so I graduated college in 2020, which was a rough year to graduate college, but nevertheless.
Yes,
so most of the time I've been spent doing my own podcasting. I've been reaching out to artists, to directors, to actors to come on the podcast, talk a little bit. And I've gotten a few from the professional industry as well. I did to say, and I said this on my other podcast, I do enjoy when musicians come on the podcast, because musicians to me have the best stories, because whether it's just playing at a bar or just how they started their career, it's always more exciting than listening to somebody that's directing like me. That's I picked up a camera and was well, that was it, so that's kind of what I've been doing. I just went down to Pittsburgh. I was doing a music video project with a Christian artist. So I was doing that just 2 weekends ago. Then last weekend I did a rock concert for a rock. Actually, I'll shout them out. It's Rock Royalty. It's a tribute rock band, and they were just playing in Jim Thorpe. So I just recorded them. Nice. And so most of it's starting to kick up a little bit. I also do photography on the side, so that also kicks up as well.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah, for me recently, I've been trying to just find different freelance work and stuff. So it's been, rough trying to find things, but that's where you got to start, I guess.
Well, are you still in the area or
yes.
When I talk about the area, which obviously we don't have to mention the place, but
yes,
relatively recent to the college.
Yes.
Okay. No, I mean, I'll have to hit you up sometime because we're actually working on 2 upcoming films, short films, of course. We don't really have the budget for feature films here yet.
Yeah.
But I'll have to hit you up sometime and get you on set because we're doing a lot of different creative, different messaging films because Shield of Hope has always been about bringing out morals in films as well as like putting our own twist with action and horror and all this other stuff too. So I'll have to bring you on board.
Yeah. And I have a camera I can use to help if you need another camera too. So there you go.
Awesome. What kind do you have now?
Canon C100 Mark II.
Ooh, getting fancy.
You guys are just going off on your movie stuff, and I can't, like, Canon what?
It's just the name of the camera.
I mean, hey, I like to pretend that I know a lot about cameras when I really don't yet. So, you know.
I know a decent amount. I'm still, I've been learning a lot. One thing I realized is now that I'm like, own a camera and I'm playing around with it and I'm researching the camera and stuff, I'm learning way more about camera and how to use a camera than I did in college. So I don't know if it's probably the same experience with you, Donnie, I'm assuming.
Yes. If anything that I've learned, the ISO has been the biggest pain in the butt for me. Because half the time, I'll put it on. Well, okay, so to emphasize my 2 cameras, which I really need to upgrade to a 3rd camera, I run a 2-camera system, but the 1 camera got dropped in the Atlantic Ocean. So it works, but the autofocus and like a few of the things you can't do other than manuals, like on the controls. So you can't do the touchscreen anymore. But half the time the autofocus decides to go, so then I have to manually focus it, which is a pain in the butt when it moves that much. But then the other half of the time, like the ISO decides to just like bump up randomly. So like I just shot a wedding. I just shot a wedding this last weekend too, and like the first half shot in like a 600 ISO or whatever, and then it spiked up to like 3,000. You're like, oh my!
So it probably looked really bad. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of pixelation. But you know what? At the end, that's why you always have the second camera running.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I only have 1 camera, so that's all I have. But I'm going to keep it in real good shape because it was a lot of money.
Do not take it into the water to get cool shots. Just don't do that.
Yes.
It's weird because you both went to the same college, and while I didn't go to that college, I did like dual enrollment at it. So like my senior year of high school, I was there.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a pretty good school.
Not bad.
Decent.
Did you want me to talk about that? No, okay.
No. One thing I did like that our school had was our for our major specifically was the sports filming program we have there. Like they started doing like sports broadcasting stuff, and I actually like worked there as a work study, and I got a lot of experience doing like doing that kind of stuff. So that was a good thing, and like we had like some really nice, expensive, high-end cameras and stuff too. It was like that was nice, but.
Yeah, I mean, working with Adam and Jason on the job was really cool.
Yeah.
That's not anything that I critique about college when it comes to where we went, but I want to say it's difficult to sit there knowing that there's so many educational and like you got the master classes now. You can go to YouTube, type in all these videos. It's just a degree for our field. Like, do we really need a degree? I feel like by the time you turn 18, you can be out of there and just like learning how to do things just based off like just watching what other people do.
Yeah, so that's the interesting thing about when it comes to any like liberal arts degrees is like it's that debate of whether getting the degree actually matters to get into that field, because like if you're going to school to be like for like medical reasons, right? You're going to be a nurse or a doctor or something. You actually have to have that degree in order to get that job. Like it's an actual requirement. You have to, if you're going to go to be a teacher, you have to go to college to, When it comes to something like video production or theater or just anything within like the liberal arts kind of area, it's kind of more like a kind of thing. Like you could, but you don't need it. And realistically, jobs are going to be looking more at your connections in your experience than they are at your degree itself, so it's kind of an iffy thing. So yeah, it is interesting when you look at that.
I do believe though that harder, or the people that don't necessarily go to college in our field specifically, I feel like they have better, like they turn out to be better at their careers only because I feel like our generation, like when we go to college, we feel like promised and like, oh, well, when we get this degree, we're going to automatically get a job. Like, sorry, you still got to fight for it. And I think that actually takes a lot of people down with their creative mindset because they just feel like, hey, I got this fancy piece of paper, I'm guaranteed. And the real world's like, no, you're not.
Yeah. So an interesting thing, and like, obviously this is a field that's very difficult to, kind of make it in. You got to be really proactive and go out there and really get the experience yourself, really push to kind of do it yourself kind of thing. The interesting thing about that is like, so I've heard a lot of people say things like this, where they're like, oh, like, I don't know, it's kind of hard to get a job in there. Like, oh, this other person I know or so-and-so who I know went for the same thing. And, they're now working a job that has nothing to do with that. They couldn't find any jobs and they're doing that. So it's very difficult. And I go, I just kind of like, I'm thinking in my head, I usually don't say this, but I think in my head, like, the difference between that person and me is that person gave up and I'm not going to give up. Right. So that's kind of always the way I look at it. And that's sort of what helps me push through is like, you know what? The people who make it are the ones who don't give up. The ones who don't go, oh, can't find a job. Well, guess I'm done. Guess I'm going to go do something, It's kind of how I always like to look at it.
Yeah, I feel that too. And what I would say to a word of encouragement before we move on to different topics here, so we don't stay on this for too long, but I will say my final word of encouragement would be, even if you're failing out there, whether it's in podcasting and starting a YouTube channel or doing your own short films, feature films, whatever, as long as you do it for you, and I've told so many podcasters this and filmmakers, like, you gotta, if you're going, like, why should an audience be invested in your work if you're not invested in your work?
Yes.
And that's one of the biggest critiques I have, because people are like, oh, well, it's been a year. I don't have it in my, I haven't done a feature or a short film yet or a production of any sort. It's like, I'm done. I'm like, well, have you tried, or are you waiting for people to come to you? Well, I've been waiting for people to come to me. I got this degree. No, sorry. You got to pick up a camera and do it yourself. And when you're doing it yourself, even if you feel like you're going nowhere, as long as you're happy with the content you're putting out and the stories you're telling, that's all that should matter.
Yeah. And if you really do work hard at it, you can eventually kind of build up, build up and have work to show people, to be like, hey, so people are more likely to hire you, if you aren't able to get the experience through jobs, get the experience through doing stuff on your own and to show people. Yeah, definitely. So moving on, I guess, the goodest boy here, we're going to go with that. The man with no name here said you said you had like questions or something for us, just as like, as we are, filmmaker type people. And
yeah, well, cause, I mentioned this before, I've become like the audience surrogate as like the non-expert, just viewer of these movies that we talk about.
Right. Whereas I'm the one with the more more knowledgeable outlook on it when we talk about movies.
Official and professional-ish. And now there's two of you.
Yes.
So this is like the perfect opportunity for the questions of like, how this stuff gets made and, little detail, or like, what's this called? What's that called?
Yeah, sure. So is there any like specific things you have on that then?
Well, let me think here. Because, well, first of all, like, is there a major difference between like home editing and, big movie editing?
I'll let you take it first, Ben. Good.
Yeah. Do you mean like compare like somebody doing their own personal short film compared to like Hollywood? Is that what you're kind of getting at with that?
Yeah, that's a good start. But even like like small videos, like not even short film stuff.
Like if you're just making YouTube videos and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that really comes down to like how the video's edited together, I guess. Cause like, I mean, film, there's a lot of very specific like editing rules and stuff. And also, I'm pretty sure in Hollywood they don't use like the same editing software as a lot of people use. They don't use like Premiere and stuff like that in Hollywood. But I mean, really, that's just one thing. That's more or less just the tool you use. Like all editing softwares, you can kind of technically do the same things with. So it's kind of like doesn't matter as much which one you use, as far as I can tell, as far as I know. I think it really just depends on what type of video it is, I guess, that you're talking about. So, like, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what else to say. It's just, there's definitely can be differences, but that's a very broad thing that's a very broad thing, and it's hard to kind of pinpoint one specific, like,
yeah, I think to sum it up, though, in terms of editing for a short film, like a small production like us and like a bigger production, is somebody like me that's like a director and typically behind the camera and edits my own films here, on the low budget. When you're directing or when you're even the cameraman on a big budget or like, semi big budget, you're never in the editing room. I mean, you might be talking to the editor, but you're not the one physically editing it now. That's somebody else's job. So it's your job as director, as a cameraman, but specifically director, since I'll speak from that perspective, to make sure you have the shots and are in conversation the whole time with the editors so that you're on the same vision. Because that's the difference between making a film like Endgame compared to making a film like The Green Lantern.
Yeah. You gotta.
If I remember correctly, The Green Lantern bombed, right?
Oh yeah,
I don't actually know the numbers if it bombed in office, but it's looked back on as such a terrible film. Ryan Reynolds laughs at it.
Yeah,
but I do have to say, I just actually, no joke, I put that on about 3 weeks ago. Me and my buddy were over here, and we had just watched like the Batman, the Dark Knight trilogy, and I was like, you know what? Let's just throw this on to end the night. So it was like 1:00 in the morning. So we threw on Green Lantern, and like we're just over here like, oh man, this was actually bad. But we remember seeing it in theaters in like 2011. I think that's when it came out, and I was just like, you walked out of that theater as a high schooler, and you're just over here like, I believe I was just a freshman in high school at the time, and you're looking at it like, oh, you know what, this is a film I could watch again. Flash forward to like 10 years later. Nah.
Yeah, that is one interesting thing I like looking at is like my difference in like viewing movies now from like 10 years ago. Like 10 years ago I was 12, right? And just kind of like seeing the little differences of like movies that I really liked back then that I hate now, or movies that I didn't care for as much back then that I love now. It's like, it's interesting to see how your perception of like movies change, especially for somebody who does learn a lot more about how movies are made. You start to notice things that other people might not. In a way, it's interesting to kind of see just how it changes. Yeah.
Well, next question. Then what's your true process for making like a short film? How does it go from an idea to a story with characters and a script and then a film? What are your step-by-steps?
I mean, I think for me anyways, it's been a little bit since I've done a short film. I have a script for one right now that I'm going to eventually do that. Yeah. I sent it to you. I also sent it to Donnie. But we could talk about that a little bit later. But anyways, it's been a little bit since I have, but from what I can tell, it really depends on the film. I think it's like, for me, it's just very a different process every time. I'm a very like scatterbrained person, and it's very difficult for me to be organized. So this is one reason why it's very difficult for me. Like, I love being the director, the cinematographer, and the editor, right? And the writer, I like doing everything, because I don't know how I would transfer my thoughts in my head to like somebody else. As a director, I don't know how I would try to like be like, hey, go to an editor and be like, here's what my vision is. Like, I don't know. It's just to me, I'm like, I just want to do it all. Yeah, so it really depends, because it's like, usually it just starts with an idea, right? You start with a concept, and that's kind of where it always is with me. Is like, I don't want to make a film unless I have a concept that I like, a concept that I think is interesting. Like when I did the short film it's on my YouTube channel, conflicting thoughts. There was two versions. There was an original one, then I remade it like a little over a year later. The remade one is definitely better. But anyways, my process for that was like I came up with a concept of, oh, this person who has writer's block, falls asleep, and talks to like different versions of their personality to try to get ideas. Okay. Just a basic concept, and then it kind of went from there. I don't really know. And then from there, it's just kind of things like, oh, and then piecing together, okay, what are these personalities going to be? What is each one going to be? How many are there going to be? How is it going, and then once that was done, then I got down to writing a script. So it was just kind of like, okay. And I just kind of pieced together what the dialogue would be from there. And I don't know. It's just, I think it's different for every project, but you just kind of start with an idea and it just kind of snowballs from there, I guess. And then,
right.
I don't know, for me at least.
The theory is that this goes back to like Native American storytelling. This goes back to like biblical storytelling. The theory is that all films, like not all films, but all stories and their concepts have already been told before. We're just kind of rehashing stories. So I always draw inspiration from films that I watch, but you always look back and say, hey, you know what? I wish they would have did this way, or this would be a cool concept to discover, and like kind of piggyback off that. When it comes to me specifically with creating my content, I love editing. I love directing. I like being on set and shooting. But to me, the writing is the biggest pain in the butt.
Oh, I can agree. Yeah.
People are over here like the editing's the biggest pain in the butt. I'm like, no, the editing's the funnest for me. Like I love sitting down now. It's stressful. You think you can't really watch your films when it's all said and done because like you've watched it like 20,000 times. So you're kind of just like bored of it by that time. But
yeah, you can't watch it the same way another person watches it. Yeah. It's so weird.
And it's fun to craft though, because like the way you shoot in your head on set, you could be like, oh, you know what? I'm going to do something different. Maybe I'll get a pickup shot of this later on and kind of craft it that way. But the writing process is so, and I'm not somebody that's big with, I let on set, this is, for anybody that knows me and how I kind of control my sets, Ben, you might be a witness to this, but because you were on set of a mile apart with me, I kind of just let the actors do what they want to do. And I don't, even though they have scripted lines, I'm over here like, if this line doesn't feel natural to you, as long as you stay on this course. And for that film, it was a father-daughter. A father-daughter wasn't the relationship of the father-daughter. They weren't supposed to like get along until the very end. So it's like, as long as you like, I don't care, just your body movement, like ignore them, roll your eyes, do whatever you need to do, like kind of act like a family, because that's what the whole point you're supposed to be. So I'm not very meticulous to that, but I am for the first time. And I've been offering to people that I know like to write and have ideas. I was like, listen, I will produce, I will direct your films. If you give me a script, we will go from there. We'll both get our names out. And, finally, my buddy Jake Benkinney is writing a film for me to do. So we should be starting production within a month on that one. So that'll be the first time that I get to interpret somebody's own content and writing to the big screen.
Yeah. Yeah, I can agree. I have some of the same struggles with writing. I think that's one of the processes that takes like the longest for me, because it's just like, sitting down and writing a script is just such a daunting task for me. And it's like, and every time I'm writing, especially when I write dialogue, I'm constantly thinking, does this dialogue sound good? Does it sound corny? Does this sound like what, which is, and you mentioned how like you'll be with actors, you'll be like, you can change this line a little bit. And, if that sounds more natural or whatever. That's how I've always kind of done things too. Like anytime I, for the few projects I've done, like I would be like, yeah, you can say this slightly different, like whatever sounds more natural or whatever feels more natural for you as an actor or whatever. So yeah, I kind of would do the same thing, but yeah.
The only exception I ever had was on Visions of Truth, when that was like one of my more mystery stuff. There was certain lines where I was like, okay, well the audience needs to hear this particular word. So I was like, you can't really like screw this sentence up. You kind of have to go with the script.
Yeah.
But like if it's not a mystery, like, and you're not trying to piece together the puzzle, the actors have full range over what they want to do.
Yeah, there are definitely occasionally lines where I'm like very set on it, where I'm like, yeah, this has to be said this way. I love the way I wrote this line. It has to be this way. There are times where I'm like that, but yeah.
I do really love Nim's scatterbrained answer trying to think of it, and then Donnie comes in with
Oh yeah. So
back in
yeah,
the times of ancient Indians and Native Americans.
yeah. So I'm very scatterbrained with my thoughts, and I just and you could probably tell when I talk too sometimes that it's just like all over the place. It's not very like
Mm-hmm.
honed together in like a coherent way. It's just kind of like thrown together. Yeah.
That's me after coffee.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I have coffee in my system, forget it. I can't talk. I'm over here stumbling like Joe Biden if I have my coffee. Like, you know, I'm just
Yeah.
there's no. That's probably a terrible joke to make. I apologize, but that is me when I have like Dunkin' Donuts coffee.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Coffee doesn't really affect me that much. I drink like I have a pretty high tolerance for caffeine, so I drink like a bunch, like 4 cups in the morning, and I'm fine all day.
I don't even drink that much water.
I'm a big coffee drinker, so
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
luckily for him, there is water in coffee.
At least a little bit.
He is trying to balance his water with caffeination.
Yeah. Yeah. So
All right, I guess next,
sure.
other story mediums. You know, you guys chose movies. Why? You know, what other story mediums did you ever consider, or, you know, can you compare the two?
Yeah, so that is actually an interesting one for me, anyways. Because so like when I was younger, like ever since I was younger, and I would watch like movies, TV shows, occasionally read books. I was never a big book reader, but you know, I always loved like it always sparked my imagination a lot. I would come up with characters and create like stories ever since I was like really young.
Mhm.
And like I did that, like, you know, and when I watched Star Wars, for instance, I remember creating this whole like story of like characters in the Star Wars universe, and like I created a lot of like superhero stuff. I loved superheroes as a kid. So I always liked creating stories. And I think what it really came down to was like, so at one point, before I ever decided to do filmmaking, my first ideas was always I wanted to write books, right? Out of my ideas. And I started to do that. There was even one point where I finished like a rough draft of a book when I was like 13, I think. It's not very good, but you know, for my 13-year-old self, I was proud of it. But anyways, so one thing I noticed was whenever I was writing, I always envisioned these stories as movies. And like whenever I was writing, I would always picture them as movie scenes. I was always writing it with the intention of like, ooh, if I write a book, maybe it could be made into a movie someday or something, like, ooh, because I think that's due to the fact that I just personally enjoyed movies more than I enjoyed books. I occasionally read books, but it was never, and I started to think about it, like, you know, through my teenage years, I was like, you know, like people who I've noticed, like people who write books, people who are like, you know, successful authors are book lovers themselves. You know, people who direct movies are movie lovers themselves. And I'm like, okay, well, if I don't really love books that much, then I'm probably never going to be successful with writing. That's probably not, you know, again, I'm always picturing them as movies. So I'm never going to be, you know, writing them to the fullest extent as a book, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, you know, why don't I switch to making movies? And that's kind of where it switched to. Yeah. And then ever since then, I just started like looking up and studying movies and reviewing movies once I created my YouTube channel and, you know, all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of the journey I went on with it, at least. That's what led me to movie storytelling. Yeah.
I guess for me, off topic, I mean, I know you kind of want an answer to stay in the field. Like, yeah, in middle school, I was writing a lot of material for myself, thinking I wanted to be like a novelist at one point in time. But really in elementary school, my parents signed me up for robotics camps for about 3 years. So for a while, I really thought I was going to be like more like robotics, maybe setting fires to things, you know, just flipping little Donnie, very chaotic, just like I was around the house here. But, you know, at the same time, learning robotics because then it ventures into a whole different side of things. Because as soon as I found out in middle school, I was like, yeah, I know what I want to do. By 5th grade, I had seen Star Wars in theaters with my dad in 2005, Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah.
So to cap off that, we honestly thought that was going to be the last Star Wars film. We never thought Disney would take it over and do what they did, but it was a long time ago. So, even then, from that moment on, since 2005, I kind of knew what I already wanted to do, which is I wanted to make films. I just didn't know if I was going to be in front of the camera, behind the camera, or say robotics came into play and I'd be doing some sort of like mechanical work on set, working with props, building stages, all that stuff. And even to this day, that stuff would be pretty cool. But I will say I never disagree with somebody more than what I'm going to disagree with you on right now. So because I get your method, you're like, okay, well, being a writer, you have to read books because like these movie people are good book readers. They love books, and a lot of writers and directors read a lot of material. I have probably to this point produced more work like from myself than I've ever picked up a novel. And one of those things is it keeps you're going to have an opposite reaction to this. I think some people feel like reading more novels gives them more inspiration. When I read novels and when I watch movies, I'm not a big, I don't watch a lot of films. A lot of people are like, oh, you've never seen The Godfathers. I'm like, nope, never seen The Godfathers, and they're classics. So I don't go watch the classics. But what I do in essence is keep myself to watching the things I like and contain myself to little exposure, because then my mind's always going, and then I don't have to worry about replicating a story that I've already heard before. It's kind of like an opposite reaction. It keeps my mind fresher when I don't read or when I don't see a lot of things, because I'm always thinking anyway about films. I don't want to be influenced to recreate something that they've already done.
Yeah, that is interesting. Yeah, I never thought about it in that way, but
I mean, you could tell me I'm a psychopath. That's fine.
That's fine. That's fine.
I'll say it.
Whatever method works for you. That's. I think that's the thing when it comes to like art in general. Whether it's film, writing books, making a video game, or whatever, animation, anything, any artistic thing you're doing. Everybody has their own sort of method where it's a lot of times people try to kind of chalk it down to oh, here's the best process for making a movie. Here's how you come up with an idea for a movie. Here's how you, and it's I mean, yeah, you can definitely learn some interesting and good tips and tricks from things like that. But at the end of the day, it has to be a 100% personal thing for you. What works for you, what inspires you, what process works for you, kind of is I think is how it goes.
And in this field, you got to be a really good problem solver too.
Yes.
A lot of people don't understand that, but when something goes wrong on set, you do have to improvise. You're standing in front of a cast and crew, which could be anywhere between 10 to 300 people. So if something goes wrong, you got to be okay, you got to be a leader. You got to stand in there and be like, hey, no worries. We'll break for lunch. We'll shoot this, we'll come back to this later. You have a production assistant that's keeping notes along the way. And you could be as freaked out as you want to be on the inside, but on the outside, you got to be composed, but as well as, say, how we direct our actors, where we kind of let our actors do whatever they want to do. But we still need to be on top of the ball in case something goes wrong. Yes. So we always got to have those problems and be able to understand things. And I think that's one of the best. I think the best directors have that problem solving ability, and they're able to function with it. Because I know, listen, I'm not trying to throw a lot of people from Bloomsburg under the bus that I've worked with, but a lot of them, they get on set, things don't go their way, they freak out, they pull their hair, and they're done for the day. They just check out, and they're halfway through the shoot. And I was like, you can't do that. You're never going to succeed in this field. If you do that in front of a big set or a production company of their own, you're going to be blackballed. You're not going to be hired. Sorry, that's it.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. And yeah, I think I think one really good example of that I always think of when I think of problem solving on set is, I mean, this is an old example, but I think of back in the 70s, Steven Spielberg, when working on Jaws, it was the prop they had for the shark, like never worked properly. It was always kind of broken or whatever. And they were like, it always had issues or whatever. And so that he kind of, Spielberg kind of was like, oh, here's what we're going to do. We're going to actually limit how often you actually see the shark. And when you do see the shark, you only see little bits of it at a time. And ultimately, that actually ended up, in some ways, improving the experience of the movie because it kind of created more mystery around the shark where you didn't always see it fully. It was always kind of like, so it actually created a cool effect in the final product of the movie. But It was basically, there was a lot of issues. And then he was like, all right, here's a solution, kind of. So like that's always a good example that I look at for that. Yeah.
Okay. Then how about this? Favorite movies to watch, like genre-wise, and favorite movies to make genre-wise.
I don't think personally. I don't know if I have a favorite genre. I can go pretty much all over the place. It's kind of like if I think the movie's good, like I like it. Like I like movies that are just full on comedies. I like movies that are very much just dramas, movies that are full on action movies. Like just a few weeks ago on the podcast, we talked about Mad Max Fury Road. That movie is like mostly like action, right? It's a full on action movie, and I loved it, but I also love movies that have like no action at all. I can't think of a specific example right now. Whiplash. There we go. There's a movie. It's not really action. It's like, that's another movie we talked about on this podcast. It's more of a deep, like close personal drama more than anything.
Yeah.
But those are still both movies that I absolutely love, and they're very, very different, So I personally don't think there's any specific genre I love more than any other. So I don't know. How do you feel, Donnie?
I'd be lying if I wasn't a big action person. I think all my films have evolved around or involved action in them. Sorry, English. But I want to say I love, and I've never made one before, but horror films to me would be so fun to make. Just because like you're obviously like thinking, and like I might not be the most horror fan, but you're always thinking about how you can try to like scare the audience. Like what would scare me right now? So like what kind of shot would scare the audience? I think that'd be like a cool concept to like maneuver in. But no, any genre is really good. I've actually gotten into mystery lately. I love Knives Out in theaters, which is amazing because I hated Rian Johnson's Last Jedi. So it was truly amazing of how well he did on that one. But I also watched, what was it? Murder on the Oriental Express the other day. I don't know if you ever watched that one. It stars Johnny Depp and a few
I haven't. I know what it is, but I remember when it came out, but I haven't seen it.
So those are good mysteries, and I like good mysteries. Like even like the old Sherlock Holmes, not like the old, but like the Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes. Those are good detective, mysterious movies. But there's a lot of mystery films that just aren't good too. So like I don't want to say I'm a big fan of that genre, even though I love the genre. But like, there's a lot of bad mystery films.
Well, that's kind of how I feel about every genre, though. Is like, and that's the reason why I'm not like specifically like I only love this genre or this. Like, I feel like every genre has their really good movies and their really bad movies. There are some really good, high quality, amazing horror movies, but there are also a lot of really bad ones. Like it. So yeah, I think it's kind of. Yeah, the way it goes with every genre. So, yeah.
I was waiting for an example.
I was
really waiting for it.
Let's see, a bad horror movie. Is that where we're going with this?
Oh no, I just wanted to compare a good film to a bad film because I've never heard your bad film list.
Bad film list. I don't know. I don't have a list. It's like, it's weird. It's hard for me. I'm really bad at thinking of examples. Like if I hear something, I'll be like, oh yeah, this is what I think of that movie. But like, when I'm trying to come up with an example, I'm like, wait, what is there? What is like, my brain just blanks and I'm like, what is there again?
The funny part was because like you were talking about that and like, I understand where you're going with it. And I was like, you know what? It's hard to make it's easy, but yeah, it's hard to make like a bad sci-fi film. And then my mind just went to Sharknado. I was like, never mind.
Yeah. It's definitely, yeah. 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 As far as which genre I would prefer to do myself, like make, um, I think for me personally, I prefer things that have, I prefer things that are more small and like personal kind of, so like a drama or things like that, because and I guess one reason why is like I don't, when it comes to making things anyways, I don't really want to get into things that involve like huge sets, huge lots of green screen and CGI. Like I don't want to get into like a lot of that. I mean, I would, but it's like I don't know. I like doing things that are very like real, kind of like here you're filming everything in this shot is real. Like I really like that. I mean,
Like
obviously you
a
still do
relatable
like
scale.
yeah. Obviously you do color correction and stuff like that, but like other than that, like the footage is all like real things. Like I really like doing stuff. It's more small, personal. I am pretty soon going to attempt horror for the first time ever. But yeah,
That's the
I
script that you sent us.
yes, it is. Another thing I will say is I love action. I love really good, well done action. I personally don't really care to direct action myself. It's just I feel like people who are good at directing an action scene, it's like amazing to watch a well directed action scene. But it's like I don't know. To me it just seems like way too overwhelming for me. I'm like that's just a lot, and like it's just not like I'd rather focus on like the story itself than like the action scene, the spectacle kind of thing. So I don't know. Yeah. So that so it is interesting when you think of like sort of what you really love watching doesn't necessarily mean that's what you want to do. Kind of, it really depends.
Right.
Like for instance, I love animation a lot of times. Like obviously Avatar: The Last Airbender, one of my favorite shows of all time. I love certain animated movies, and like I don't know, like The Incredibles. There's an example. Like I love that movie, things like that. But like, I don't really want to get into animation, because that's very. I mean, first off, like I can't draw or do art. Like I can't do that at all. I'm like bad, and also that's just a lot of complicated computer stuff, and yeah, I don't want to do animation. So yeah, there are more. So yeah, I prefer very like real kind of small drama type things. So I guess is kind of where I would mostly lean personally.
All
Yeah.
right. Well, I guess that's all for the questions that I have for now. If you want to move on, if we need more time, I can probably think of more.
Yeah. I mean, we can definitely use up more time unless there's anything else we want to talk about.
Well, I do want to give a question to the man who must not be named.
Yes.
Because I think because we've asked or we've talked about some of the films and stuff that we admire. What is it in stuff that we talk about? And you don't have to know all the films that we've talked about or like the series, but like what kind of stuff draws your attention when you watch a film from an audience perspective?
Oh, I really love clever stories, like Fight Club. We talked about that on this podcast.
Love that movie. Yeah.
Yeah, I was so confused and weirded out at first, but as soon as they made that connection, I was like, it all makes sense. All those little details, all those little hints.
Yeah. Like a very well connected thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it just tied it all together, and like it really made me appreciate just how like clever it all was and how well it was orchestrated.
Mm-hmm.
When are you drawn into a film though? Is it like, would you say you give like, if you start watching a film, like say you sit down watching Netflix, Disney Plus, whatever, it's a new series. Do you give it a whole episode, or like within the first like 10, 15 minutes, do you know like, hey, I'm not going to watch the second episode or like watch the rest of this film?
I really try to get through as much as I can before I drop something. So like I have like many anime and stuff like that where I watch through it, Like, okay, this isn't that good. I watched through the rest of the season. Wow, that was really terrible. And then I watched through another season. Like, okay, I'm finally gonna drop this. Oh, sorry, I bumped my mic.
Yeah, that is actually an interesting question, because I had like a recent example of something with this. So, do either of you have either of you heard of the recent Amazon Prime original show Invincible?
I've only heard good things about it, but I have
Yeah.
not seen it.
So I'm not going to spoil anything. I'm just going to talk a little bit about like the basic setup for it, which is mostly like the first episode. So I started watching it and I literally heard nothing about it. So I didn't know like any of the good things about it. And this was before it was done too. I think they only had 4 episodes out when I first watched it. It's the season's over now. It's like an 8-episode season, I believe. 8 episodes. But basically like the basic setup, I mean, it is based on a comic series from Image Comics, but I've never read the comic series nor have I ever heard of it, so I had no clue about anything about the story. But basically the setup is like in the first episode, most of the episode is just kind of introducing the characters in the world and stuff. And the problem for me at first was, wow, this world seems very like they just followed a lot of superhero cliches. It was just superhero cliche after superhero cliche, and it just felt like they were trying to almost parody superheroes, but like it felt almost too much like they were just doing the superhero cliches without doing anything interesting with it. So I was like, it's okay, but I was kind of bored with it. And, you know, these are like 45 or something minute episodes. So they're not even like short episodes either. And throughout most of the episode, I was like, you know what, once this episode is over, I'm probably just going to be done and not continue watching. And then the ending of the first episode happens. And anyone listening who's watched it knows what I'm talking about. The way the first episode ends immediately makes you interested, no matter like how interested you were beforehand, because again, I wasn't really that interested in it. That the ending of the first episode just like draws you in. You're like, shit, I gotta find out what happens next, you know. So I'm not going to say what it is that happens, but you know. Okay, so our recording stopped there for a second, so we're just going to get back into whatever I was talking about. But yeah, anyways, so what the interesting thing I found about that first episode of Invincible was I was thinking about like the placement of that big moment that happened at the end of the first episode. And I was thinking like, what if they had decided to, let's say, put it at the end of the second episode or something like that, or halfway or partway through the second episode? It was interesting to me because I was thinking about it and I was like, if they had done that, I probably would have never finished the series. I probably would have never watched past episode 1. So it's kind of like, okay, so the placement was very deliberate in hooking people, right? Where you're like, you know, making sure it's at the end of the first episode. Because I think most of the time when people are starting a show and they're kind of bored, they'll be like, I'll at least finish the first episode. So it was very smart for them to put that hook kind of at the end of the first episode. And it was very effective, and the rest of the show was pretty good. So, and I really liked it. So it is interesting to think about like the placement of those kind of things, especially when it comes to like TV shows, because, you know, TV shows are obviously episodic, and you have to kind of think about like what you put in each individual episode, kind of how you space out the story. So it's interesting. Yeah. And I'm not sure what that was, what else we were talking about. I feel like there was
Well, I pretty much asked the question about like what as an audience draws you in right away.
Yeah.
Right. It very much depends. Like there's a wide range of stuff. Like in Mad Max, you know, before I knew it, it was like an hour in just because the intricacy of like the world building and like how interesting it was and how brutal the resource management was, as well as the amazing action scenes.
Mm-hmm.
So like, you know, that all drew me in. And as I mentioned with Fight Club, there's the clever stories that as soon as I like heard that one little detail that draws it all together, I was hooked, you know, and I went back through the entire, you know, in my mind, the previous bits of the movie and thought like, oh yeah, I get it all now.
Yeah. Yeah, that's.
It retroactively drew me in.
I think that's one interesting thing about Fight Club, that movie specifically, and it's really effective if done well. Is the idea of like knowing, like not knowing where it's going at all, because like I think some movies can be kind of predictable, where it's like it's in a specific genre, and you're like, yeah, movies in this genre usually go this direction, so you can kind of be like, yeah, this is probably going to happen, this is probably going to happen, this is probably going to happen, you know. But with Fight Club, it's a movie where like the first time I watched it, I already knew like the big twist, which I'm not going to say, but which kind of sucked that I already knew the first time I watched it, but I still knew nothing else about the movie. So like as I was going, I was just kind of like, what's going to happen next? Because it's very weird and different, and it doesn't, the plot doesn't follow the same way a plot normally would in a movie you're used to. So I think for me, one thing that draws me in a lot of times is just something that's like unique, something that's different, something that like if I'm watching it and I'm like, oh, that just seems different than anything I've seen before. This isn't like, the average everyday movie, that's kind of what draws me in a lot of times. And that could be a large range of many different things. It could be just the style of how it's edited together, It could be like the story itself, like how the story is structured itself.
Oh,
Sorry, that's my telephone. For some reason, it decided to go off.
Yeah,
give me a minute.
Well, boy.
Hello. 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 Would you believe it was a spam call?
We recently had some issues with your car's extended warranty.
Well, this one actually was about we get like a lot of it, and like, okay, so you can include this or you could edit this out, either way. So, I mean, there could be bloopers, let's put it that way. So when I go on a rant right now, listen, I love my law enforcement, I love my firefighters, but you don't know who to donate to when they give these spam calls to say, well, you donate to your current firefighters association. It's like, do we really believe they're getting the money?
Yeah.
And that's what this
probably
one was.
Not. Who knows? So. Also, like, I don't have the money to donate to anything. I can barely donate to myself. So
can y'all donate to me, please, first?
Yeah, exactly. I can barely donate to myself, let alone donate to my fire department.
So I apologize. Hopefully that does not happen.
Yeah,
again.
it's like
fine.
If you want people to donate, call the rich people. Okay, who are the rich people in the area? Call them.
The donation link will be in the bottom of this podcast, aka my bank account.
Yeah. 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 But anyways, yeah. So I think, yeah. Anyways, as I was saying, yeah, something that's unique about a movie is kind of what draws me, and something, and again, that could be anything down to style, which is part of what drew me into Mad Max. Was just, I think style wise, it was just so different than anything I'd ever seen, things like, it could be anything, just interesting story structure, whatever. Yeah. Have you thought of any other questions or anything like that?
Oh, right.
Yeah.
I thought I might be able to come up with one quick, but it's not coming.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to think if there's any other specific things we could kind of discuss or anything like that. One thing I was gonna say is, Donnie, you said you would be interested in doing horror movies at some point, and trying out making a horror movie. You could come on as part of the crew for my horror movie whenever I actually do it. That is, if you're interested.
Awesome. Yeah, like I said, let me know. Not saying that my schedule is going to get super packed, but I know in the fall, I'm working with a local church. I'm also continuing to work with that music video with the Christian artists out in Pittsburgh. And I don't know if you watched one of my latest podcasts, but his name is Chase Hewlett. I hope I pronounced that right. He is actually moving to Atlanta. He graduated from Full Sail University. He's doing a few films down there, and he actually offered if I would come down for a week in the fall. So, let me know what the time schedule is, and I will try my best to fit it in, because I would, like I said, you helped me on so many of my films, and just being there for me during all the highs and lows of my career so far, I want to do the same thing for you. So,
Yeah, for sure.
How nice.
All right.
I went to therapy to be told to be nicer, so I'm trying.
Oh,
really?
good to know. Good to know.
Yeah. I feel like some people, have like it's almost like they have a natural like thing where they don't sound very nice. Like even if you are nice, your voice just doesn't sound like you're being nice. It sounds like you're being mean. You know what I mean?
Am I one of those?
Like
because I feel like
cadence.
I am. I have a resting face as well. So even if I'm not like, listen, I can be happy in the moment. Like when I go on like walks and like, so like not saying it's a fling, but there's this one girl that I typically go on hikes with. And like the whole time, like I'm on the hike, I finish up the hike and I'm just like looking around, I'm enjoying myself. And she's like, you look pissed off the whole time. I was like, I'm enjoying myself though.
Yeah.
It's like, I can't fix the ugliness. I'm sorry.
I think it's like you have like a kind of like aggressive voice almost. And I think that's just kind of like the natural, voice, which I mean, that's kind of, everybody has their own kind of tone. Like for instance, Man with No Name here has a very naturally like soft spoken, just low, like,
I have a
very
hard time
casual.
raising my voice.
Yeah.
We need to combine our powers.
Yeah.
Together we are one.
You have the perfect combine, the best parts of both, and then you have the perfect tone of voice.
I guess I feel that because when I do sarcasm, people think I'm like dead serious. And I'm over here like, well, that's the whole point of sarcasm.
Yeah. Makes sense. All right. I don't know if there's anything else, unless you have anything else you wanted to add or say.
Is that to me or the man who must not be
to
named?
You, or to you, or both? If anybody has,
I just want the record to show that I hated WandaVision.
Oh, did you? Yeah,
I did.
I just finished that. We can talk about this without giving spoilers, I guess, because I don't think the good spoiler here.
Now, if the man who must not be named, if he's not going to watch it, I don't care if we spoil that gosh darn TV series.
Yeah, I probably won't.
Okay, we can spoil it. Okay,
whatever.
We can spoil it. So, I mean, I feel like there's not much spoiler anyway. I don't know, because like I feel like everybody knows the general premise anyways. Like of.
But did you get fulfilled by watching a Marvel film? Did you though? Like, yeah, was it worth it? Was it? Because to me, listen, I waited a whole year. I'm not saying like obviously like there's two periods I gotta look at now. I look at the Infinity Saga between the first Avenger to Endgame, and like Endgame, it's almost between Infinity War and Endgame. It's almost impossible to get back to that hype level. Like I don't care what Marvel does in the future; it's probably not going to ever surpass that. But like, okay, so it's the first. We just came off a pandemic. We had Spider-Man, Far From Home. That is correct, right? Far From Home, not No Way Home, whatever. Far From Home was back in 2019. And so we were looking forward to the first thing at Marvel in the new MCU. And I just thought, listen, I will give, and this is me as a low budget independent filmmaker, I will give them praise for saying, hey, they're doing stuff, the first 4 episodes, to get like the different vibes from like the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, all the shows growing up through. But they wasted my time. Like I appreciate it, but it was wasting my time. And then it got to the end, like between the last there was 9 episodes, 8 episodes, the last 4 or 5 episodes after that. It just was it wasn't anything like exciting. Like I get it, she's technically like an anti-hero. She could be a villain at times. She's been a villain in the comic books, but I'm like, is she really though? Because her character just never came across as part villain to me. She came across as defensive. But I'm over here like, and even like they're like, and I'm sorry, this is gonna be a spoiler, but like the lady that was helping her in the whole process is like, oh, well, she's the bad witch and magic, like, whoo, and then she winks into the camera, which became a great meme, by the way, but a terrible. I did not think it was executed very well on camera. I'm sorry, but that I went on a rant.
So I think for me at least, I think the show had me for a while. Like I was like the first few episodes was kind of interesting to see they were trying the different like sitcom styles of different decades or whatever, and then they had the episode where they revealed what, you know, like what was happening in the real world, and it was like, okay, and then they started crossing over between the two after that. And for the most part, I was like intrigued, and I was like, where's this going, and I think it was like maybe the last one or two episodes that really dropped the ball for me, especially the last episode, where it was just kind of like, oh, that's it, that's the conclusion, okay. Like there were some really cool moments in there. So like one of my favorite moments of the whole show is the end of, I want to say the 5th episode, I could be wrong. Basically, her brother died in the movies, Pietro, and like Pietro shows up in the town, right? And it's like a weird moment. And I love that they didn't get the same actor they got, because that character has also been in the X-Men universe.
Yeah, so they used the X-Men universe one.
Yeah, they used the actor who played him there, which I think is a much more fun, interesting version of the character anyways. But they used that actor. And
what did he do other than just like bits and pieces of comedy? Because he had no relevance to the story.
Exactly. And I think that was the annoying thing for me, is that moment when I saw him and I was like, wait, is that? And I'm like, that's that actor. That's really cool that they did that. And it was like, and he's a good actor and he does it well, plays what he's supposed to well. But then once you get to the end, I was just kind of like, wait, why was he there again? Like, I loved that moment, that reveal at the end of the episode. And then like the next episode, he was kind of a fun little added character. And then he just kind of wasn't there for the most of the rest of it. And then it just turned out he was just some guy who she used to pretend to be Pietro, and I was just like, oh, whatever. Like
everything was just in her head in order to create her society and keep her society the way that she wanted to live her life. Which, don't get me wrong, there's pros and cons about that philosophy, but that's not something I wanted 8 episodes on, or 9 episodes, whatever it was. It's like it just wasted my time.
Yeah, I definitely think it could have been done in less time. I also think the conclusion could have been way stronger. Like, it's just, the big conclusion is like it ends with a big CGI battle of 2 witches fighting in the sky, which is kind of the boring cliche way to end a superhero movie or show. Like, it's just like, whatever, you know. I was just kind of like, okay.
So here's a better question for you now. So moving forward, who is actually going to be leading the MCU? Like, what character? There's no strong enough character. I'm sorry. Like, right now, unless you bring back an Iron Man, Captain America, which you don't want to rely on, because that era is over. Okay, Marvel needs to move forward.
Do you mean like strength, like within the MCU?
I mean, like, what character is going to draw? I don't mean like physical strength. I mean, like, what character is going to draw the audience to feel for? Because you had Captain America and Iron Man, 2 characters that, like, you can argue strength wise, yes, Captain America and Iron Man, but like their charisma on screen, like, they were the characters that most people cared for, like,
especially Iron Man. Yeah.
So who's like? There's no character to me that's going to do that.
Right, and I think if they can't bring those characters back, because that would be a really cheap, dumb move. Like you know, like Iron Man's, spoiler alert for Endgame, Iron Man's death was like a really big moment that really like if you just kind of brought him back, it would just kind of be like, oh, well, that moment didn't mean anything. It would just kind of cheapen that and cheapen the ending of the Infinity Saga. So yeah, it is interesting, because I think they want to lean into like Spider-Man eventually kind of growing into that role of being one of the big ones, or like,
my immediate thought was Spider-Man, because, you know, everyone always loves Spider-Man, but they always have that weird copyright stuff with Spider-Man.
Yeah,
that's the problem, because they don't own Spider-Man.
It's hard for them to lean into Spider-Man fully, because right now they are still, because there was that time where they almost pulled him out completely, because the companies, what is it, Sony, who owns Spider-Man, got mad at Disney. Disney got mad. I don't remember. It was something about dispute about which company got more money out of it. I don't remember exactly. And they pulled him out for a while. They're like, he's not going to be in the MCU anymore. Eventually they reworked it and they were like, okay, yeah. But like, you know, there's nothing stopping that from happening again. You know, it's like, yeah. So it's hard to lean into that. And you know, maybe, and the thing is, I think they're working on even phasing Thor out of it, because they're going to have like another person become the next Thor, kind of, and
Oh, right.
it's so in the next Thor movie, and I mean, I guess you have like who else you have? You have the Guardians of the Galaxy, and like, and I mean, Captain Marvel can't be the leading character, at least not in the state she is in now, because right now she's the most boring character
They're
in
trying.
the MCU.
They're trying.
So maybe they'll improve the character, because like and I was really disappointed when that movie came out, because I wanted her to be a great character. I wanted the first, female led superhero movie in the MCU, that is, not ever.
I was
But
going to say, respect Wonder Woman.
Yeah,
Don't you dare go down that route.
yeah. No, the first MCU female led movie to be great. I was really hoping it would be great, and I knew like a lot of people liked the character in the comics and stuff, and they just dropped the ball on it, just making her an interesting character, and maybe they'll find a way to fix the character. I doubt it, but I don't know. Who knows?
Did you expect, now listen, what I'm about to say is going to be political, but did you expect anything less from a culture that was preaching feminism across the board to not lay into that when, Captain Marvel came out? Because not only did that turn a lot of people away, I mean, the actress just clearly, when she made that comment that she didn't want males specifically of a certain race to go see the film, that's like a country artist coming out and saying, hey, we're going to ban guns. Like you gotta realize what your audience is, and that was an absolute killer for that film. Plus you get the whole conspiracy theory. And I will say it's a conspiracy theory because it's not proven, but people were showing theaters that they bought tickets to, and they're like, oh, it's sold out, but only like 3 people are here. So who's buying the tickets? Do you remember that whole thing going on?
I vaguely remember hearing that, but I really don't know.
We kind of got the feel like it was like a PR stunt, like the company's buying up their own tickets just to like do this fake grossage of money.
I do know when I saw the movie, I'm pretty sure it was a filled theater. I think.
I mean, I can believe it. Again, what I just said was they were going off of conspiracy.
There was conspiracy theories, which you never know how true that kind of stuff is. Yeah, I mean, I don't care about a lot of the political stuff going on in the background and stuff. I don't care about any of that at all. What I care about is it a good movie? Did the final product end up being a good movie? Was the character a good, interesting, well-written character? And I just don't think she was, So like that's, at the end of the day, that's all I really care about when it comes to it. Because like, you can make a movie, with the reason to with feminist intents or whatever. Like I don't care about that. It's for me it's like you can do that and make a good movie at the same time if you
Listen, we're on the same page with that, but we've hit a point in time where, and I talk about this extensively on my podcast, where whether you have a right-leaning agenda or left-leaning agenda, any agenda that hammers you down in the throat area in a film creates a bad film. Like that cannot be your sole premise for creating a film.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It's basically what's turned the last 4+ years into. That's why you have these bad films. And I'm just trying to say, I think that's what Captain Marvel was trying to do more so than tell a story, which ruined her character.
Yeah. And I think they focused a lot on making her a strong character, like rushing her to become one of the strongest Avengers, you know what I mean? Where it's like, whereas a lot of the other characters, you kind of had a slow progression of them becoming stronger over time, or like, like Iron Man in the first movie, his Iron Man suits weren't like, amazing, but, and then they slowly progressed over time so that by the time you got to Infinity War, his Iron Man suit was like nearly invincible and it was like grafted to his skin and, whereas like, I feel like Captain Marvel was kind of like, one movie, you didn't really see a lot of struggle with her powers. I mean, there was kind of like a block and then she unblocked it at one point in the movie, or I don't remember exactly, but it was just kind of like at the end, she was just like, oh, wow, I'm super powerful now. Look at that. I just never felt there was that like character struggle or anything like that,
Can we really just say what it was, Captain Marvel? It was a big screw you to Black Widow. Like, so here's my instance. Why didn't this Black Widow movie that's coming out next month go where Captain Marvel was? Because Captain Marvel was not it was basically irrelevant to the final chapter of the MCU, other than coming in and like blowing up the ship with her fist by flying through it. Like,
Yes.
so, and plus, where was she during the attack on New York? They were getting ready to nuke the whole New York City. You don't think they would have called her from outer space somewhere in?
Yeah,
it creates so many plot holes. You should have just went with the strongest female character you had right there, which was Black Widow. Instead, you're like, oh, Scarlett Johansson apparently is not good enough for this because you threw her to the back burner.
Yeah. It does seem weird that they didn't go with that, like this, because they are doing a Black Widow movie now, so it's not that they didn't want to do a Black Widow movie.
What's the point? Spoiler alert, she died.
Yeah, it's like she died. Well, yeah, exactly. That character already died, so it would have made more sense to do a a Black Widow movie before the movie where she died. Yeah, no, I kind of always felt the same way. It was like, because she's a character who's been there, since the beginning, and it would make sense to finally give her own movie. And it's like, it just seems weird that they waited till now to do that.
And it couldn't have been any worse. Like, I feel like this, even though we haven't seen a lot of trailers from it, and like I really don't know what the heck's going on with her character, it still couldn't be worse than what we got from Captain Marvel. So you might as well just put her out there. She's been through the MCU for a decade plus with you guys through all these franchises. You might as well just, even if it was the Leonardo DiCaprio moment for The Revenant, like, oh, here's your participation award because you've done so many great films. You should have just gave her the film just for the sake of it. I'm not big into participation trophies or like saying you earned something, from a while ago just because you did it. But I feel like in her case, like, that's what you should have just went with if you were going to tell a story anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. But who knows? Maybe their attempt at fixing Captain Marvel's character will work. Maybe it won't.
Well, I'm interested though, because it helps. The only thing that Captain Marvel introduces, which is good, is the whole fact that I think we're going obviously to outer space. I think the saga on Earth, other than your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, even like the title Far From Home, or not Far From Home, No Way Home, something might happen where he goes to outer space. But you're going to bring in the Fantastic Four eventually. You're going to bring in all these, you see Guardians of the Galaxy, the new Asgard that's going to end up showing up somewhere, so maybe you have that. I think Galactus is your best option for a supervillain because he eats planets. So why not? But yeah, I feel like that's going to be your best option moving forward, but you got to go to the Galactic stage. So for that, I give Captain Marvel credit because now we are going to outer space because of her.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if they really want to push her as one of the big characters, they need to really focus on her. If that's where they're leading with her character, they really need to focus on her next movie and focus on actually telling a good story with it and actually creating an more interesting character, which it is possible they could do, but we'll have to wait and see what happens.
On this note, on Marvel, what characters, like what superheroes, or I guess just characters, do you guys actually want to see coming next?
I don't know. I'm kind of like, I kind of like don't care as long as they make good movies. But like, I guess so for characters that haven't been in yet.
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be interesting to see how they do Fantastic Four, just because like I don't think there's ever existed a good Fantastic Four movie.
Ouch. That's harsh.
Ouch.
I mean, most people, I feel like a lot of people
agree
with that.
Jessica Alba versions?
I mean, they were all right. They were kind of dumb. They were kind of.
That was my childhood crush on Jessica Alba, and she rocked it in the suit. Don't you dare disrespect that movie.
Oh no!
Between her and Chris Evans, listen, her and Chris Evans were in that film. Listen, you got to give them props to where props were due. Although I still think if Marvel was smart, they'd bring Chris Evans back in alternate universe, and he's Johnny Torch again. That'd be fantastic. But that's it.
That would be cool. Yeah. No. I liked those movies as a kid, but I now just kind of, they just seem very like there wasn't much of a point to them, kind of, and like, but and then nobody, I don't think anybody likes the newer Fantastic Four movie.
No, that was but I hate to keep interrupting, but I had to call my buddy Jake on Sunday because Sunday matinee on Fox Movie Network. What would you think would be a good matinee? you think like the Godfather series or like, something of the Marvels, Spider-Man. No, they had Fantastic Four showing at 3:00, the newest version. And then they topped it off with X-Men Apocalypse. Like, who's watching that?
Yeah, I don't know.
What kind of movie matinee is that? Like, oh, I'm going to spend my Sunday afternoon watching these two terrible films. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think the annoying thing with the newest Fantastic Four movie was that, like, I think I like all the actors they have in there. Like, I like, who is it? It's like, it was Miles Teller, who was in Whiplash. I like him as an actor. You had Michael B. Jordan. I forget the other two actors' names of like the main four characters, but like I think casting was good, and I was like, okay, these are good actors, but it just was nothing. The movie was pretty much nothing. I feel like it was just kind of like I don't even know what to say about it other than nothing of any relevance or interesting thing happened.
Mm-hmm.
They got their powers.
It wouldn't be the 9% on Rotten Tomatoes, would it?
Yeah. They got their powers. I don't even remember everything that happened. I just remember nothing.
I only remember it because it was bad. So it was the first film I have ever seen. Like, I've seen films cut to black and do like a 7 years later. But this is the first film I've ever seen cut to black twice and do time jumps.
Yeah, that's interesting.
They cut it to like, I'm not kidding you. So because it showed Ben and Mr. Incredible or Mr. Fantastic, whatever he is. So literally they showed him as kids in a dump yard with Ben getting supplies. So they met each other back when they were like little kids. And then it went to black 7 years later. They're at a science fair at the school. And then like it goes through, they get their powers, and when the team breaks up there, like they escape jail or they go to jail, whatever happens, it cuts to black again. And it says 1 year later, and it comes back and they're like a team again. I'm over here like the worst storytelling I've ever seen. I don't know who the director is, but I don't want to ever say this because I feel like it'll impact my career if I ever make it like a bad film in the Hollywood industry. Mm-hmm. But I hope whoever that director is doesn't get hired until he like redeems himself, because he just committed like a sin.
Heresy.
Yeah.
Yes.
See, there are bad movies. There are bad movies like that, and then there are bad movies that are actually entertainingly bad. I love those. Like The Room and stuff like that. But that's a whole separate topic of movies.
Well, Donnie, do you have any characters that you want to see join the MCU?
All right. See, I'm a more big DC fan when it comes to like the smaller characters that haven't been seen on screen.
Right.
I'm looking forward.
Agree.
You know, one of the biggest things too is I would actually like to see Miles Morales, because I did love the Into Spider-Verse film. So I would like to see a live action version of him. Mm-hmm. As far as now, Fantastic Four, if there was a good Silver Surfer plot line, because I like the character of the Silver Surfer, because he's like this anti-hero as well as like a hero. What I think Marvel should do, if I have to make my recommendation, which I think in order to captivate the audience, because like, we've only seen superheroes be controlling like a decade plus. I think it'd be cool if we brought in like the Deadpools of the MCU and like did like an anti-hero like 10 years.
Right,
instead of like true heroes, like vigilante type heroes. I think it'd be like a pretty cool, just see how they run their universe while all the heroes are like fighting Thanos or like
a
whatever
big saga with all of them. Yeah.
I think it would be more interesting, because then you'd have like, let's face it, when you cast heroes on screen, like, do we really believe they're going to kill Tom Holland Spider-Man? Is anybody worried about that? Is anybody worried about them killing Thor?
No.
Is anybody really worried about our heroes falling this early in the MCU? But you have anti-heroes who just like, oh, I just killed somebody yesterday. Oh, me too. And high five. Like, it's like, you don't ever see that in a Marvel film. Now, I don't know if they would go that dark, but I think it'd be an interesting twist and like would keep people like energized.
Yeah. I mean, technically they do, because of the Disney gaining the rights to Fox and everything, buying up all the Fox stuff. They do own Deadpool now, so they could do something with that.
Just
within the MCU.
I pray to God they do not touch my Wolverine. because Logan is one of my favorite films of all time. Hugh Jackman is my favorite character of all time in the MCU. And I know he's not in the MCU, but you get what I'm saying.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I was like, listen, do not touch, do not recast. At least wait like a good decade before you even touch hands on that character, because then I will physically show up at your doorstep and then there will be problems.
Yeah. Logan is a great movie, though. I love
I don't
Logan.
think I've ever seen it.
Yeah.
Oh, you should watch that.
Yeah, maybe we should.
That
should be one of the ones we do on our podcast. That was actually a question I was going to have at the end of the podcast, which we're probably getting ready to wrap up pretty soon here, anyways.
Pretty soon, yeah.
So we kind of want to start doing this thing where you're only the second guest we've had on, but we want to kind of start doing this thing where when we have guests on, we ask for our next movie discussion that we have will be a movie that was recommended by our past guests. So, yeah. So do you have a movie suggestion? So you could go with Logan, or you could choose something that you think maybe neither of us have seen, or just for whatever reason, any movie that you think we could have an interesting discussion on.
What you guys really should watch is you should watch Avatar: The Last Airbender, but the actual movie version.
Oh, we did. We already talked about that on here. We already talked. Yeah, way ahead of you. That was our first movie discussion on this podcast. That was episode 3. Already done.
I have to go back and listen to that, because if you guys watch the TV series, I can't imagine that you probably would like the actual movie.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe you did. I don't know.
No, nobody did. No, I don't think I've ever heard of a single human being who likes that movie.
I've learned to never say nobody, because there are Last Jedi lovers out there, and I need to be very, very careful with those people.
I can see why people I can at least see why somebody would like that.
Don't you dare.
But with The Last Airbender, there's literally nothing you can pull from it. Even by viewing it from a different perspective, I feel like there's just nothing of value that you could pull from it. You gotta
remember too, because
I will give it one thing. Some of the action scenes are pretty good. The bending is terrible, but other than that, the actions are kind of good.
Kinda.
At least entertaining.
I guess some of it. There's occasionally an entertaining moment. I guess I don't know. It's
well, you got to remember too, and of course, some of the bigger Last Jedi lovers and the lovers of the new Star Wars trilogy. And albeit, listen, I grew up with the prequels, but I still love the originals, like the 70s, 80s versions of Star Wars. I still love the best, but I respect the prequels because of the storytelling and the world building. But most of the time, when I say never, there's kids that went to theaters to watch Avatar, like that movie, and they will love it because they took it away from what it meant to them during that time period. So there will be people that will love it, because it's the same thing with the Star Wars community.
I don't know though, because I feel like most people who watched The Last Airbender watched it and a lot of them were kids, but kids who were already liked the show, because it came out very soon after the show was finished. It was around close to the same time, and so I think a lot of the kids who did go see it were kids who were fans of the show. And if you're a fan of the show, I cannot imagine liking that movie.
They got pronunciations wrong. They skipped a bunch of the story. So if you already love the show, then there's a ton that you would see wrong.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if that actually plays in the mind of kids, though. We're talking about
true.
Yeah. We're talking about middle schoolers, young.
Oh yeah. Funny though. You bring that up though, because I watched The Last Airbender. I never watched the show until this past fall for the first time ever, and I've already watched it 5 times now, and it's already one of my favorite shows ever. The Last Airbender movie I watched for the first time when I was much younger. I watched that long before I ever watched the show, and I did not like it. I don't remember how old I was. I was probably close to 13-ish, maybe. I did not like it. I didn't even like it then. I mean, I had no context for it as far as the show went, because I'd never seen it. I knew what the show was because I'd seen ads for it and stuff, but I did not like it even then. But
so let me throw out another movie suggestion, because Now I'm looking through, and I wanted to make sure it wasn't. I wanted to make sure the title was what it was. It was from 2008, and it was called Jumper. I don't know if you ever remember that movie.
Oh, I never watched it, but I have heard of it.
So
yeah.
when I watched it, according to Rotten Tomatoes, I didn't think it was a bad film when I saw it in 2008, but apparently it's a 15%. So I would like to hear your opinion on it. I might have to rewatch it myself.
Yeah,
I like the concept. The concept of Jumper is amazing.
Yeah. I have a general idea of what the concept is.
I have no idea about this. I just looked
Good.
up.
Don't even look it up online because the reviews are terrible on it. So
no, I just see I guess it's the movie cover image.
Yeah, go ahead and look at that stuff, but just be careful about you might not want to see it when you see that it's 15% on Rotten Tomatoes.
I mean, I feel like we've out of all the movie discussions we've had on here, there's only one so far that's been a bad movie. All the rest of them have been movies that we liked because it was like the Lord of the Rings trilogy we talked about Fight Club, we talked about Whiplash, Mad Max Fury Road. What else? I feel like there was another one. Maybe I'm not thinking of. I don't know. Either way, maybe there wasn't. I don't know. Maybe I'm just thinking there was. Either way, all the movies we talked about so far, besides The Last Airbender, were good movies that we liked. So maybe it is time to talk about. So maybe if we don't like it, then we'll have a chance to talk about a movie that we don't like.
Yeah.
For the first time in a while. So sure, we can do that. Jumper from. What is it, 2008?
2008. Starring Hayden Christensen, by the way.
Oh, wait. I think I do remember hearing that, that's actually really interesting because the only thing I've ever seen Hayden Christensen is Star Wars prequels. So I do have another interesting question. I may have asked you this before on when I was on your podcast before. I really don't know. But what is your favorite Star Wars movie?
My favorite Star Wars movie? Empire Strikes Back.
Okay, good. Me too.
Now, I will say a very close Star Wars movie is Rogue One. The only one of the Disney movies that I actually appreciate. Rogue One to me, just because and I like that doesn't really it ties in the end of episode 3, beginning of episode 4, but it's its own standalone and it's kind of outside the Star Wars normal universe. So I do appreciate that one a lot.
Yeah. I personally don't love it, but I like the climax. It's the third act is kind of my favorite part of that movie. The rest, I don't know, but yeah, Rogue One's not bad though. But yeah, no, Empire is definitely easily the best one. One of my favorite movies of all time. It would probably be on a top 10 list of favorite movies of all time, actually, if I had to make one. Anyways, so we could probably get ready to close here. We'll watch Jumper for not next week, but the week after that, because next week we actually are going to start talking about a new TV show. Last week we just finished our discussion on Avatar. Last week we finished talking about the end of season 3. So we're starting a new show, which is we're going to talk about the first season next week, the first season of Bojack Horseman. We determined this last week, which I have seen a few times. One of my favorite shows ever, but the goodest boy here has never seen. So
nope, I barely know anything.
We'll get his first viewing of it. Donnie, have you seen Bojack Horseman?
I have not.
It's really good. Netflix original. First season is a little rocky in the first half or so, but once you get into the rest of the seasons, it gets really interesting. Really deep stuff going on, and it seems like a dumb adult cartoon at first, like another one of the dumb adult cartoon shows, kind of whatever. That's all it is. But it kind of gets really interesting and deep, and the story actually matters. It's not episodic where each episode is doesn't matter for the next episode. Everything kind of builds into a story.
Maybe I will have to check it out myself.
Yeah. Netflix original. It ended its 6th and final season last year, just over a year ago. One of my favorite shows of all time. So, So we'll talk about the first season of BoJack Horseman next week, and then the week after that, we will talk about Jumper. So there's our plan for now.
All right.
All right. And before we leave, Donnie, can you just plug all of your stuff again? I know you did at the beginning, told everyone where to go, but just one more time before we go.
Absolutely. So I'm Donnie Shields, Shield of Hope Productions. You can find Shield of Hope Productions on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. You could even find it on Apple Podcasts. I know with Apple Podcasts, Apple Podcasts with Spotify. I know with those two, I'm rambling on, but with those two, it was a Hope Speaks podcast originally, but we just changed it to the Shield of Hope podcast so we can have both our podcasts that we do on our channel underneath them, so not to confuse people. For my personal Instagram, you can go to _Donnie Shields _. And on Facebook, I'm just Donnie Shields, if you can find the right one, because apparently there's like 15 of them. So,
all right. That sounds good. All right. And now we will plug our podcast. I mean, I know you're listening to it right now, so obviously you're already listening to it, but I'll just go over all the places you can listen to it. So you can find it on my YouTube channel, which is NIMTV. That's NIMTV, no spaces. Look that up on YouTube. You can find my YouTube channel and the podcast is on there. You can also listen to WABAN on multiple different audio platforms, including Anchor, Breaker, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, Spotify, and it's also on Apple Podcasts. It is released every Saturday at noon Eastern Standard Time. So that's when you can expect to see a new episode of the WABAN podcast. Anyways, thank you for listening. I've been Nim.
I'm the goodest boy.
And goodbye, everyone.